Hello, my name is Hannah Hilton, and I will be talking about hotel liability for guest property from common law through today. Let's start with what is an inn. An inn during the Middle Ages was generally a large space where meals were provided, and then at night it was converted into a space where people could sleep. In a rare case, if the inn became successful, then the rooms where the guests would sleep would be separated from where they drank. The concept of hospitality law began in England during the Middle Ages as a way to protect the guest while they stayed in these establishments. The laws that came from this time were developed under what is called English common law. English common law is still used today, and some of the statutes that were created are branched from it, usually adding some type of limitation or regulation. In English common law, the innkeepers were 100% liable for all guest or visitors' property and the full value of them. A notable case is Cunningham versus Bucky. This occurred in 1895 when Mr. Cunningham decided to stay at an inn in Beverly, West Virginia, which was owned by Mr. Bucky. He was assigned to a room with 2 doors. One of them could not be locked. Before he went to bed, he had placed his wallet on the nightstand, and in the morning noticed that $250 had been missing. During the night, Mrs. Bucky, after having an earlier altercation with Mr. Cunningham, had asked one of her workers, a colored man, to take Mr. Cunningham's money and not question what she told him to do. The judge on the case gave these 2 statements. An innkeeper is not only responsible for the misconduct of his wife, but also of all those connected with the hotel service, and no display of a guest money will receive the landlord from the dishonesty of his servant in stealing it. For, as heretofore shown, he is a guarantor of his honesty. Second quote, the common law is as well known upon grounds of public policy for the protection of travelers imposes an extraordinary liability upon an innkeeper for the goods of his guest, though they have been lost without his fault. In this case, the judge found Mr. Cunningham guilty. Things began to change. The changes started in 1905 in Washington state when legislative sessions passed laws on the rights and duties of the innkeeper. These laws lessened the amount of liability that the innkeepers had on guest property. In 1909, the Washington State Supreme Court approved 3 exceptions to an innkeeper's common law liability. The 3 exceptions were if it came from an act of God, a public enemy, or from the neglect of the guest himself. A notable case happened in 1909 with Watt versus Kilberry. When a husband and wife were staying at a hotel in Spokane, the wife had left a large amount of money on the bed, along with a gold watch and 2 gold rings. She leaves the room for a short amount of time, not locking the door behind her, and when she returns, they are missing. The judge ruled that the hotel was not liable for the loss of her property due to her negligence. Modern laws began in 1915 when the state of Washington passed RCW 1948. This continued to limit the liability that a hotel held on guest property. Under this statute, valuables included money, banknotes, jewelry, precious stones, ornaments, railroad mileage books or tickets, negotiable securities or other valuable papers, bullion or other valuable property of small compass. Hotels can qualify for being a safe harbor, in which they have to do 2 things. The first is to provide a safe or vault in rooms for protection of these valuables. 2, they must also notify the guest that these safes or vaults are available to them for their valuables to be placed in, and there must be at least 3 signs in 3 or more common areas. These areas can include behind the front desk, in elevators, or where breakfast is served if that's an amenity that hotel provides. By doing this, hotels are relieved of their liability of stolen property in most cases. A notable case happened in 1975 with Walls versus Cosmopolitan Hotels. Walls had checked into a hotel and placed his expensive watch on the nightstand before leaving his room. When he returned, the lock in the room had been damaged and his watch had been stolen. He claimed that the hotel was negligent in keeping his room safe, but the hotel stated that in accordance with RCW 1948, he should have placed his watch in their safe. The judge sided with the hotel and found them not liable for his stolen watch. An important limitation that was added to RCW 1948 is that if guests deposit their valuables with the hotel, then the liability cost is capped at $1,000, and the hotels are not obligated to accept any property with that capped amount of $1,000. Now, are these positive or negative things occurring in the hospitality industry? With the Supreme Court ruling of 1909 and RCW 1948, which are still in effect today, they have large influences on the current hospitality industry. These laws were put in place with the main purpose of protecting everyone involved. This means that hotels are no longer completely liable for situations that they had no connection to or could control. By lessening the liability on the hotels, they are now putting more liability on the guests themselves and making sure they are responsible for their own belongings. Without these two laws put in place, the gray area in terms of the law would be much greater, and hotels would be put in a bad place when it comes to paying for damages of the lost property. These changes also help hotels become more successful and not be dragged through the mud with claims where laws favored guests and not the hotels. Guest and hotel relations have the opportunity to grow and become positive because things are more clear if something were to go wrong, and the relationship would not be tainted by old lawsuits. Overall, a lot has changed in regard to hotel liability of guest property. Hotels are no longer 100% responsible, and now the guests have had to bear some of that responsibility that they used to not have to hold. Some laws are different from state to state, but generally they are pretty similar. Just like when the laws were being created, the main goal was to protect the guest, and now these laws protect the hotels as well. This is a good thing, and it has been beneficial to the hospitality industry. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed.